My job is not to convince you that I'm human. My job is to tell you the stories of our humans.
Because I do think that it can be disheartening to put yourself in circumstances where you know that there's this barrier and you're constantly reminded that you're being othered.
It can get draining to almost deal with people and try and convince people and build these bridges with people that are completely not understanding.
You said in your TED Talk, The Muslim on the Aeroplane, that when an elephant offers you mints on an aeroplane, it's not always easy to accept. Do you see it as a responsibility for Muslims to then change the minds of others regarding Islam, or it being the responsibility of Muslims to make others feel more comfortable around us? What's your kind of perspective on this?
I definitely do not believe that it is the duty of 1.8 billion people to make people feel comfortable. But I do think that the creative and the outspoken and the ones who want to be thought leaders, the ones who criticize society a lot, because I began criticizing society. That's where I started, being an angry, outraged 12-year-old girl who was about fight the system, fight the system. And I think that if you come from that mentality and you object to certain structures and you object to systems that are hostile and unjust, I think there is an element of duty to teach the society how to become better. But that's if you choose to be outspoken. But like, for example, I have an older sister. My sister does not want to walk onto an airplane and feel like she is the elephant. And she shouldn't have to, And I think being a Muslim is such a private, intimate experience. Like I think prescribing everybody to go out there and like do it, I think that would probably push a lot of people away, because no, you should not have to speak on behalf of 2 billion people in the world, But if you have it in you and you are constantly critical to society and you want to change it, then I think it becomes your duty to change it. I think it becomes your duty to have these conversations. And there's also different sects. I know certain individuals who their job is to change within the Muslim community, to, maybe destigmatize mental health. They don't need to go to sitting next to some white person and try to, be like, hey, we're not so bad. Like that's a different line of focus. We should all be doing something. As for me, I believe it is my duty because half my family is white, non-Muslim, originally Trump supporters. And the work that I did had the power to shift their mind. It had the power to open their mind. My grandmother, Allah yarhama, my mom's mom, converted to Islam at 76 years old.
Wow.
She was 76 after a lifetime of hating Muslims. Allah yarhama, man. May Allah bless her in her grave and give her paradise. Like, I remember this like 70-something-year-old woman learning to put a hijab on, learning to make wudu, learning to pray like she was a child after years of just not loving us as Muslims, and
I have chills.
Yeah, me too.
Allahu Akbar. And I hear so much. I'm gonna critique society, like I just
No, please
but
do
like
your thing.
I feel like a lot of the social leaders, the thought leaders, the super woke, activist-minded people in my network, there's this idea like, nah, screw that. We don't need to prove ourselves. We don't need to. Humanity is hurting right now. Sure, there's racism in the United States. Like, I am not, as a system, this is corrupt, wrong, and needs to be dismantled. But you got old Joe from a neighborhood in the South who grew up with an alcoholic father, an absent mother, sexually abused in some capacity. There's no health in their streets. There's no food access in their streets. The education system has given up on them. There's a school to prison pipeline where these kids end up either using drugs, selling drugs, or ending up in prison. Like, these prospects are not fair to anybody. And we're not dealing with just white people or with anti-Muslim people. We are dealing with human beings who have hearts, who have pain, and who deserve the chance to become better if we truly believe that there is something better. And there's so much criticism, man. These are humans. And I think I had the unique privilege of being a waitress at my father's restaurant. If I have any public speaking skill, it's from being a waitress for like 6 years at my dad's restaurant.
You have to like deal with people.
There would be racists. There would be men who hated us, who would come into our restaurant but loved our hummus. It did not matter how much they hated us. And I would get up with a little smile on my face. Here you go, my grandmother's recipe. Sorry, and like give them this like bounce of a tale of our art and our beauty. And I remember this one time, this guy, there was a table of 3 sitting at table 6, right? And afterwards, this guy was bad energy. This guy was closed off. He would not say thank you. He would not say please. He would bark his orders at me. And at the very end of their dinner, when the women walked out, he stayed behind. He pulled me aside and he's like, you showed me kindness despite how I treated you. And he's like, I will not forget this. And then he left. He tipped me. He didn't tip as good as I thought he was going to tip.
But he tipped at least.
It was a spiritual tip.
The bare minimum.
Yeah. And
Amal, you make me tear up.
Yeah,
my tear ducts. Wallahi, my tear ducts. I feel like I need to like refresh them.
Oh my god.
There's so much humanity, and I prefer humanity to politics. Always, hands down. I prefer humanity to politics. And I think when we lose touch of that, we see a more critical.
And I think humanity does have the power to change politics. I don't know if that is a naive thought, but I feel like it is powerful what you're doing 1,000%.
I have a lot of work.
You're doing a lot of work, but do you feel like at some points it can get draining to almost deal with people and try and convince people and build these bridges with people that are completely not understanding, completely not open to even accepting new information or new ideologies?
You know, when I was traveling and speaking, so COVID obviously halted that completely. When I was traveling, I'd go to universities all over and just talk. And I would completely forget to talk about the fact that I was a Muslim until like an hour in. I'd be like, oh yeah, and Muslim stereotypes. Let's talk about that real quick. I don't start there. My job is not to convince you that I'm human. My job is to tell you the stories of our humans, and when I would go up on stage, I would tell them about the war and what my family had gone through and the house fires and the sickness and my dad losing his father in a war zone and my cousins getting shot and killed. And I would tell these stories of I would tell these human stories. And I would always aim to find common ground. I'm not going to try to sit there and convince you I'm human, because if you don't think I'm human, that's your problem. That's not my problem. But I would try to bring you come here, let me tell you this story. And wallahi, girls, when I would have these performances, the most unsuspecting people who would come up to me after were US soldiers, men who went overseas and killed Muslims, and they would come to me, they would have tears in their eyes, and they would be like, I know what you're talking about. I saw this stuff. Thank you for going up there.
People really relate to stories.
They really do. And I wouldn't even get to the whole ISIS thing until much later in the talk. I wouldn't even talk. I'd forget to talk about the hijab and be like, oh, by the way, we're not oppressed, because they're already so swallowed in the story. And I felt that was a much better display of who we were. I'm an educated girl who writes poems, and I'm gonna share my poems with you. And I have this goal, and it is to make grown men cry. Maybe that's
I feel like without even knowing the answer, I feel like you've achieved that goal.
So I really feel there's something powerful, because again, it is the men who run the world. It is our men. It is Muslim men who get the most heat. The only reason why anybody feels bad for us as Muslim women is because our men oppress us, right? We're covering because of the men. We're sexualized by our men. And it's them that I feel like, if I can get to your heart, man, and make you cry, this makes you small again.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting method, and not everybody agrees with it. And we do need our shakers. We need our people who are going to fight, and we need our people who are going to dismantle systems of oppression. And there are people who are like, it is not my job to be kind to you if I think you're racist. But man, I was ignorant once too. That's for sure.
This was something that we both really wanted to speak with you about. And I think it's so interesting because I think in my experience, when I was about 15, 16, I remember walking down, so what the town I live is called Norwich. Like I say, extremely white, like I was the only hijabi, barely any diversity. I remember walking down the streets in Norwich and being so conscious to like smile at everyone, because in my mind I was wanting to take away the narrative of Muslims are terrorists, they're violent, they're XYZ, they're whatever they are. And I remember like I can even picture the street so consciously doing this. And I remember when the Paris attacks were happening, and there were a few terrorist attacks one after the other in Europe around 2015, I want to say. And I had a job, like a little weekend job, and it was the first time I was assigned to go kind of to the door and meet and greet people. And it was the day after those attacks had happened. And nothing had happened. Nobody had said anything to me. But I just remember feeling like, when you know that people are blaming Muslims and you feel like you're carrying that blame, So I feel like for a long time when I was growing up in this kind of environment, it was almost an unfair burden that I felt I carried to represent Islam and Muslims and to show that we're good people. That when I left, I almost thought, what was I doing? Why was I trying to show people that we're XYZ? Because that shouldn't be something that I have to prove. To the point that I think that as I got older, I kind of switched off like what other people think. Whatever they think is their problem. That's their issue. It's not my job to try and change it. And we're talking about 10 years ago now. So like I was 14, 15 at the time. I'm just turned 24. But it's really interesting to hear you speak about it in this way, because I think I definitely had turned off that mindset of why do I need to approach or speak with people that I know aren't welcoming to me, or why do I have to prove myself? Because I do think that it can be disheartening to put yourself in circumstances where you know that there's this barrier and you're constantly reminded that you're being othered. But it's really interesting to hear you kind of use the take of just sharing your stories and trying to humanize that without it being something that you have to necessarily prove, but just coexisting and being open to at least trying to build bridges.
Definitely. And I think one of the greatest challenges is when we ourselves are like, why are Muslims doing this? Like, what is going on? What is happening here? And I think there came a point, because trust me, it's not easy there have been times when I was not planning to have to represent Muslims and like be a leader. When I'm walking off an airplane, there was this one time I was walking off an airplane. It was like 10:30 at night. I had a long week. I'd been traveling. I was tired. I just wanted to go home. And as soon as I stepped off the plane, there was a man. He had holding the hand of his child, and he sung a song to me, "Suspect," as soon as I stepped off. And I stopped. And I turned and I looked at him, and he like literally smiled at me and like lifted his phone and pretended like he was talking on the phone. And I was like, I was flabbergasted. I've never used that word, but I was like heated. I was red. My heart was pounding. I was like, I was not ready for it. And there is a unique thing they call us the 9/11 generation. All of us, everyone here, every Muslim in the West after 9/11, in the literature is called the 9/11 generation, because we have heightened paranoia, we have heightened anxiety, we have heightened depression, we have these psychological symptoms that impact how we perceive ourselves. I mean, man, I watch my back. I've had rape threats in my car driving home from the masjid, like from random groups of men. Like, it is a heavy load. It is.